Hey, and welcome to No Credits Needed. This is a podcast about creativity. I interview a bunch of different creative people. We talk about their creative process, their creative journey, and what kind of projects they're working on. And all of the time, I learn something completely new and I can apply it to my own creative process. And I hope that you guys learn something new too. I want to mention this is obviously the video version, but if you're more into the audio only version, you want to listen to it in the car, not get distracted, you want to pause it, pick it up later. The link to that will be in the description. It'll be the nocreditsneeded.com link. You'll be able to find the audio only version. You can follow us on Instagram on there as well. Get a little bit of behind the scenes, what's coming next, see some clips of the next episode, and overall just stay informed as to like what we're doing with the show. I also wanted to mention if you guys enjoy the episode, if you guys enjoy the podcast, it means so much if you guys could like, subscribe, share this video. Even if you watch the video but you don't want to listen to the audio only version, just go download it. It just helps us out. It helps us out so much. And if you do want to, thank you so much for being a fan of the show. I really appreciate it. It really helps out a lot. With all that out of the way, I just want to get into the guest for today. He's an incredible guest. His name is Jacob White, and like a lot of people that I found over the years, I found him on Reddit. He reached out and he told me that he posts a series of short stories online completely for free, and I checked it out. The short story series is called A Many Tale, and it's a story that follows a mouseling. Yes, sir. A mouseling that blips in and out of space and time and gets himself into different scenarios. And it's a really interesting concept because this whole concept allows Jake to basically write a completely new, write in a different genre every week, different theme, different story. And you'll see why. And it's really interesting how this whole project of his started as a writing exercise that he turned into something that can be consumed by a lot of people for free. And we talk about all that. He's also a novelist. He hasn't published anything yet, but if you read his short stories, you're gonna think to yourself, like I thought to myself, like when am I gonna be able to read this guy's stories? He's a really talented writer. And yet, what else can I say? He's an amazing guest. I learned so much. I hope you learned so much too. And without any further ado, this is Jacob White. Just for people that don't know, I mean, I'll talk about it in the intro as well. You publish a series of, I would call them like short stories, right? Every
Yeah,
week.
exactly. Yep.
And you put them up for free on your website on
Mhm.
amanytale.com. Can you just let us into more or less how that project started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it kind of started maybe right prior to COVID hitting, or right around when COVID hit. And
Hmm.
sort of what I was doing was I've been an author for a long time. I didn't go to university so that I could kind of study writing and art full time. And something that kind of happened when COVID hit is that I realized that we played D&D, like me and my friends. And I guess I kind of took for granted the effect that that had on my ability to kind of come up with really interesting concepts. And it's not necessarily that the game influenced the writing directly, like I wasn't playing a game and then writing that down later at night. But I think just the same way that I'm also an athlete, the same way that like you weight train or you go running, you don't do it for a
Hmm.
little while, you start to lose your edge. And I started noticing that when I was writing my prose, I was like, what is happening? I kept getting it's not writer's block. It's just it didn't feel as good, or I didn't
Hmm.
have as many interesting ideas, especially word wise. Like my word choices weren't as solid, or the humor wasn't as good. And a lot of that comes down to flow. So I thought, okay, well, I need to figure that out. How am I going to do that? Oh, wait, what if I just do a quick writing exercise every day and I grab a
Hmm.
die, like just a D20 from D&D,
Hmm.
and I could just roll it to help with character choice. And it's not going to be a real project. It's not going to be a book. It's not going to mean anything. It's just going to be a fun little idea for 15 minutes a day just to keep myself sharp. And
Hmm.
then, well, eventually I started to really like it. And here we are now.
Yeah, I was reading that on your website again, how like improv plays like a huge role in
Mhm.
being a writer and being able to come up with like ideas on the spot. Like obviously you go back later, you might polish it up a little bit, change
Yes,
it, but like just getting your idea out there is huge. Like so you don't have that like it's like you said, it's not writer's block per se, but it's a like once you get that idea out, maybe a better one comes out later or something that you didn't think about
yes,
before. And it just
completely.
keeps flowing. And it's like it's so interesting that you said you started it before COVID or right after? Right after you said, right? Right
It's
after
kind
it
of weird
started.
because I had the idea prior to COVID, sort of like
Mhm.
the I always liked Mouse Guard and Redwall, like little mice stories. I just thought they were cool as a kid.
Mhm.
I'd always wanted to do one. So, and I'd always wanted to do a serial or a comic or something, but I don't have the time to draw that much. So I kind of the proto version was pre-COVID, but then when COVID hit and I realized, oh, I need to do this exercise. Oh, I'll use my mouse character because I'm never going to really
Mhm,
use that for a novel.
mhm.
And then, you know, things
Yeah,
happen.
no, I'm yeah, no, the reason I bring it up is because, like, that feeling of, kind of feeling like you're losing your mojo a little bit, like,
Yeah,
during COVID. I do stand up, or I did a lot of stand up before COVID, and, when you're actively going out to perform, writing is a little bit easier in the morning, or, like, you're gonna go later and work it out or whatever.
yeah,
But when COVID hit and we're just locked in and you're, like, staring at the same 4 walls over and over and over again, it's just like, well, how creative can I actually get here? And it feels, because, like,
totally.
a lot of stuff for stand up is like you go out into the world, you
Hmm.
overhear someone, you see someone do something funny or stupid or interesting, and you're like, oh, I should write that into a joke. And when I saw that you created this kind of like you created the randomness from the outside world with a die, and you're like,
Yeah,
let's see what the fuck happens, and
yeah,
let's make it here in the room. So I
completely.
thought that
It's
was super interesting.
thanks. Of course, like if you're a stand-up comedian, you definitely appreciate that because it's a completely different. It's the same kind of writing, right? When I sit down to write prose, you're just trying to think observationally. You go out in the
Hmm.
world, you're trying to find little nooks and crannies, and even if you don't mean to, you go back home and you sit down with a pad and a pen, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that was hilarious," or "This works, that works." Yeah, it's
Exactly.
super similar.
Yeah, I think. By the way, sorry about this, but I'm going to reference your website the whole time. It's going to be a great plug for the show. But I
Yeah.
was I was reading how you're like, yeah, you can you could tune in one week and it's a sci-fi. You could tune in another week and it's a it's a western. Because,
Mhm.
like you said, whether you want to or not, if you saw a bunch of westerns that week, you're going to be more inclined subconsciously or even consciously to be like, hey, I want to write this today, or I want to write a sci-fi, or this or that. And I thought it was cool that you took it, like, literally into your own hands and rolled the die and be like, all right, let's see what's coming up today.
Yeah, that's
So
accurate. More than accurate. It's totally true.
I was wondering, what decisions do you leave up to the die?
Okay, that's a really good question. I don't know if anybody's actually asked me that specific question yet. So, yeah, like the idea that he blips and goes to different worlds every week,
Hmm.
every once in a while it's a die thing where I'm just like, I don't really know what I want to do, and I'll roll it. Or I don't know what I want to do 6 weeks from now because sometimes I have them laid out ahead of time. Um, Sometimes that gets left up to the die. Most of the time it's a mood thing because I want to focus on the novels. So this
Hmm.
is a many tale sort of allows me to take a little break and write like a few thousand words each week for fun. That's where
Hmm.
the rolling dice comes in, and that's where I didn't want to roll die for. Sometimes there are big character moments, there are big questions that are posed, or every once in a while there's a story that I'm actually like tremendously proud of in there, even though it's all pulp fiction. Every once in a
Hmm.
while there's something that I'm like, I can't roll for that. Like I know what I need to do. So sometimes it's just sort of an initial roll the dice, see what happens, and then just go with the flow.
Hmm.
And sometimes the decisions are, by go with the flow, I mean, say like he walks into a, for lack of a better idea, walks into a bar and he starts talking to someone, and I roll to see if that person's hostile or not. Like, why
Got
is
it.
this guy? Because the main character is a mouse for those people that are unaware. And
Hmm.
why is this weird? Why is this rodent guy sitting next to me? I'll roll for that. Sometimes I go with it, or sometimes I roll for a lot more things. Like there was actually a story maybe a few weeks ago where there are other characters like our main character Opaline who also sort of blip in and out of worlds, and they all travel together, even though they're not necessarily a band. And I rolled the dice for this one character to go through the process of that happening because he had rolled previously a very good check to notice something that he otherwise wouldn't have. And I went,
Hmm.
wow, it's weird that I rolled everything for this story because it worked out. And then all of a sudden I rolled tremendously and
Hmm.
he became a main cast member, which in this story is very difficult to do. There's only 36 people that in the universe that can blip and go from world
Hmm.
to world. And it ended up surprising the hell out of me. And I texted my friend who's also my editor and I went, dude, holy shit. That was so crazy. So yeah, sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's big things. It could be as small as, is this cup of coffee going to burn his lips, just to get a little detail
Hmm.
in the writing, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's so cool that, like, it's surprising you as, like, not even as you're writing it, before you even write it, you're like, "Oh shit, this is what I'm in for
Yeah,
today."
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think we slightly touched on it, but like the fact that you're rolling the dice because you would play D&D a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're see, I don't play D&D, but I
mm,
am aware that the dungeon master is the person that comes up with the story. Is that right?
yes,
And that is who you are in your games, correct?
yeah. Since we were, I don't know, 13 and a half or 14. I've been
That's
like,
crazy. That's
I'm
so cool.
23
Like
now, so it's been like the same 10 years.
the amount of imagination I imagine that goes into that is insane.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like play, but my mom, like our mom, we always host in our basement. And
Mhm.
growing up as a teenager, my mom was always like, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, if I want to be an artist and I want to work, this is just work for me in a weird way.
Mhm.
Like it's
Mhm.
fun work. So
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of imagination is totally true. It's crazy.
Is D&D what kind of gave you that spark to think like, "Oh shit, I could probably write stories for a living," or I want to be a novelist, or I want to create these incredible worlds? Is that kind of what gave you the spark?
Actually, it was cartoons as a kid, and
Mm, okay.
like I was a big reader. Me and my friends were always big readers. We were the kids that went into the section in the library and just we tore through everything. We read like 4 shelves worth in a year, but we didn't take like you're supposed to take
Nice.
the reading test on the internet and you get
Mhm.
points and stuff. And we would always never do it. And our teacher would be like, "Why are you doing this?" We'd be like, "We don't have time to take the test. We got to read more books." So it started really prior to that. Like I would wake up for cartoons, whether it was Saturday morning or like later on, it became like Wednesday and Thursday nights, and I
Mhm.
would look forward to that all week. And I just started drawing and playing with Legos and
Mm.
like we used to play games in our yard that were a lot like D&D, but they were more like LARPing, I
Mhm.
guess.
Mhm.
Starting as a kid because you don't really know what LARPing is. You're like 8, you're just playing with a stick.
Yeah.
And I was always the person that kind of came up with that stuff. And then when everybody would go, all right, like this is the world, this is my character, this is what I'm doing. And I think that it all evolved from that. And then D&D, like becoming a teenager and becoming more mature about it. We don't
Mhm.
play the way a lot of people like normally play. Like we play a little bit more emotionally. We get really invested in things, and it's a lot of fun too.
Mm.
But it all goes back to that original. Let's go in the yard with some sticks, and this the road is a river, and we're going to get on our bikes and we're going to row down the river and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Started
Like
early.
there's something so like I don't know how to put it, like instinctual to like storytelling. I feel like it just runs in like our blood as humans that you just
Mm,
it like once you start getting the juices flowing, like the worlds and the imagination tend to just come up. But I know for D&D, like you come up with the world, you come up with the rules, you come up with a ton of stuff, and it's just that's
yeah.
incredible. Um, so, like you said, it started with cartoons. When was the first time that you actually like sat down and wrote something and were like, "Wait, I'm onto something here. Like this is
Ooh.
what I want to do."
So my mom's a choreographer. So
Hmm.
we used to travel with her all over the place,
Oh,
and
cool.
me and my brother would honestly tremendously blessed because that's where it all comes from, right? That's where being able to go to dances and see people of every gender and every race and everything being extraordinary on stage, and then being able to watch my mom craft stories collaboratively with those people,
Mm,
bam, that hits the nail on the head. That's that starts building the house, right? And I think the first time that I really noticed, like, wow, I really want to do this, was that I was always really into movies and stuff. I
hmm.
remember watching Jurassic Park in my grandma's basement, and I had this notebook, and we were leaving to go on vacation, so I drew like a raptor or something. And we left to go on vacation. Really, it was just we were skipping school to go with my mom on a choreographic trip.
Yeah.
So we were sitting in the auditorium, and me and my brother started running around, and I think it was in Buffalo University in Buffalo, New York, and all of a sudden, all the landmarks around the university, we just escaped. Like we ran backstage, and in that
Hmm.
notebook, I drew a raptor, and I said, okay, well, this is where they live. And then me and my little brother sat down and we drew out this map with all these little characters. And
Hmm.
we basically, over the course of that weekend, we played a game progressing through the locations of that area, but they were imaginative locations that were made up.
Uh huh.
Damn. And I think that's what hit it. Because then I went home and we were playing with Legos and it just kind of went crazy from there. I still have
That's
that
pretty
notebook
cool, man.
actually. It's actually right over there.
Nice. Yeah, I still have I still have the notebook where I wrote down my first stand-up jokes. Not, you know, I would never say those jokes ever again.
Yeah,
Probably never perform them, but it's cool to look through them and be like, "Huh, this is where it started."
yeah,
And like some of those jokes evolved into something, more complex and something that I could
absolutely.
actually perform. It's always cool to like go back and see like your previous notes.
And they always bring up a sense of not necessarily security, but a sense of development because you can look back and like I was looking
Yes.
through that. I mean, I drew that when I was 8 years old, but I
Hmm.
could look through and all of a sudden I go, "Whoa, that name! I know that name." And then I look in a novel I
Hmm.
wrote 2 years ago. I go, "Holy crap! That's where that entire
There it
thing
is.
was rooted from that weird, awfully colored picture that I drew in this notebook
Yeah.
10 years ago."
It all lives in our brains forever. Like and the notebooks like help as a reminder. Like it just like it's like an index. It brings you back to that part in your brain. You're like, oh, that's right. This is where it
Completely.
lives.
Yeah,
This is
it's
where I
pretty
put it.
special.
Yeah.
It's
That's
real
pretty cool,
special to
man.
go back.
You said that you didn't study to be a writer, correct?
No.
So right after high school, just put your nose to the grindstone and just start writing novels,
Yeah,
or
so
even before high school.
yeah, I wrote my first book. I think I was a sophomore or junior in high school. I mean,
Hmm.
terrible. It was awful, but it was very intimately awful.
But how awesome did you think it was when you finished writing it though?
Oh my
Now.
god, I the amount of people I shared it with that I wish I could take it back. I mean, I would be walking in the hallway with like a girl or with a friend, and they'd be
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I heard you wrote a novel from this person." I'm like, "Yeah, you want to read it? Like, you want to read it? It's gonna be amazing." And then a couple months later, I was like, no one read my book. Oh, they tried.
Dude, but we need that confidence, like, to, like, think our shit's, like, the best when we first write it.
Yeah,
Or else you wouldn't have kept writing.
yeah. I mean, I actually am really glad that I was like that, and I wasn't arrogant or anything. It was just like, yeah, like I did this thing,
Mhm, mhm.
and I'm so glad that I had that attitude because I just didn't stop. And now I can appreciate
Exactly.
good from bad, and I can discern the difference between actual good quality work and non
Yeah.
really shitty work. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like a key part of, like, being a creative person is, like, just a healthy dose of delusion as you're writing, be like, "Wait, this is
completely.
genius. I'm
Yes.
gonna this is gonna be amazing." And then, you show it to all your friends. Like, I almost every person, I've talked to on here has a very similar experience to that. It's just like, "Damn, I wish I wouldn't have, shared that story with all those people back then." But it's a cool part of, like, our origin story.
Yeah, it absolutely is because those high school years were I'd be playing D&D games and I write these maps, and basically the D&D games were me testing books that I was working on or that I wanted to write one day. So I'd be
Mhm,
like, "Hey guys, like I have this idea," and then I pitch my friends the idea, and they go, "Oh, that's fun! Like we want to do that." And then
mhm,
we get into the philosophy and stuff because kind of going back to that prior question, the first thing that made me go click after those old notebooks from when I was a kid, I guess the moment that made me really click was like the first game that I ever really ran, and
mhm,
it ended, and we were just having fun with it. But then all of a sudden, it got really philosophical,
mhm.
and we were all crying at the end. I was like, "What the hell is happening?" We were all crying, and
Mhm.
you need those moments because even though at the table it's really intimate, it's really great, and I'm sure sometimes this happens in stand up too. When you're in
Mhm.
front of a crowd, there's this energy, but when you're writing, for me, when you're writing a book, it's only you. So even
Yeah.
though my friends cried at the end of that, when I wrote the book my sophomore and junior year, no, it didn't even come close to being cry worthy. Now I rewrote it and it was better, but it's still, yeah.
Yeah, the something about having your words or your story or your creation touch someone on a level like emotionally like that. Like for me, most of the time it's like laughter, but like for you to get to get the players to get emotional and philosophical and cry, it must have been like, oh, this is a like it almost feels like a superpower, and it feels like
Yeah.
very humbling to think that people take it so seriously to the point where like you're talking about it, you're talking about the philosophy behind it and all that stuff.
hmm Yeah. It really, really, I don't want to say messed me up, but it really mixed up my understanding of, wow, I actually can really do this. Like if I can sit in my basement with my friends and we
Mhm,
can make something and I can surprise them like that with making this fun game that we were doing that was just for entertainment, and all of a sudden
mhm.
actually ended on a note where everyone went, "Whoa, whoa, what just happened tonight?" And then we all sat around and talked about it all night, and that huge awakening and
Mhm.
confidence awakening. That's where that, "Hey, you wanna read my book?" comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. So that book, you said you rewrote it. Is that
Mhm.
a novel that you have like ready to publish, or is it just like that's your first work and you're keeping it just for yourself?
Yeah, so the idea with that novel, as it started to grow, because I write fantasy,
Hmm.
and a lot of people that write fantasy write in the same universe or they write in adjacent universes. And the fun part is that a many tale takes place in most of the novels that I write. Now, it doesn't actually cross over at any point abrasively. Like, it's not just boom, characters interacting,
Hmm.
but they exist in the same larger concept of rules and gods and lore and such. And that first novel, I went after getting it published for a long time, probably up until right prior to COVID hitting. But by then, I had, that was the rewritten version. It was much stronger. But by then, I had already written another book. And then by the time I started querying it, I had written two more. And the pace at which I was writing and the
Hmm.
quality just skyrocketed. And I said, this story is actually really meaningful to me. And I don't think that I'm actually mature enough to nail it down, even though I've rewritten it two or three times. So I put it
Hmm.
on the back burner. I stopped pitching it. And I probably a few years down the line, maybe when I'm actually published and I have some novels out, I'll definitely reassess that because it's important to the chronology of the lore and it's also a personal thing. So I'm waiting.
That's good to hear. There's something to be said about like because they're your babies. Like
Mhm.
there's something that you've crafted over of years at this point. There's something to be said about having the emotional maturity to set it aside and be like, it's not ready yet, or I'm not ready to finish it yet, or whatever the
Mhm.
phrasing might be for that. Because like you could definitely rush it out, maybe just, post it online if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll get to this in a second, but like I know you want to traditionally like publish your book. You don't want
Mhm.
to self-publish things, but you could, right? And you
Yeah,
could put it online. You could do this and that, and then maybe you 10 years later you're like, shit, I could have maybe perfected this or released it a little bit better. Since it's so near and dear to your heart, I definitely I feel the emotion there where you're just like, it might hurt for now, but I'm going to set it aside, come back to it later.
definitely, definitely.
Because we learn stuff along the way, and then you might come up with a story in a many tale that influences that. You're like, oh, that was the missing piece that I needed, or
Exactly. And that's been happening a lot, especially because I've been working on more and more of these novels that are based on concepts that I tested at my D&D table and
Mhm.
ideas that I tested in more and more books. And then I look back at that original novel and then it's children, I guess. And I go, wow, all these other projects are just growing and maturing that idea. And it's going to be really fun to forget about it for a few years and then come back to it and say, okay, it's time. Open the drawer.
Yeah. I was gonna get to the point of so I mean the way I found you was through Reddit, and then you reached out and you're like, hey,
Mm,
I do this like serialized, free short stories every week called a many tale, about a mouseling that blips in and out
mm,
of like different worlds. Super cool, super interesting topic, and I mean the whole structure of it sets yourself up for I can do whatever I want every week,
yeah,
to a certain point. Like I know they're serialized, but some of them are standalone. But I mean, even then, you could, if you wanted to, make every story completely different just with the same character, right?
exactly.
Um, but you make it clear in a couple times in your website that you're a novelist first and foremost. So
Mm,
I find it really interesting that it started as first as a exercise just for you, and then you realize, wait, I can make this like serialized, put it online. And then after that, I could see from your website, you're like, wait, maybe from here people can find my novels. And then you kind of set it up. I don't know if it was on like on purpose or you kind of like discovered this along the way, but it seems like it worked out perfectly for you to put your stuff out there for free, get people to your website, because it's not even your personal website, it's your short stories website, but you kind of turned it into your own talking around in circles here, but
No, you're right.
um, but did you have that in mind when you started, or like how did that kind of build up to the point where it is now?
Ooh, awesome question. So the intention behind it, at least, is personally fascinating. Like to me, when I reflect back on things that have happened. So kind of also going back to another question that I kind of didn't answer fully because they tie in well. I was training to be a professional discus thrower post high school, which is why I didn't go to school. I was like, I
Mm,
want to focus completely on my art and athletics and try to do both at the same time. And I don't want to worry about studies. And I was never, I really love to learn. I love to learn. I really don't like being told what is the right thing to learn. I'd rather just buy a bunch of books and read them. And then the decision to also pursue athletics at the same time was quite difficult just because you need high level coaching and that can get expensive and things like that. Over the course of those 4 to 5 years, athletics turned to the point where discus is very hard on the body. I'm not sure if you're familiar with discus or shot put or hammer.
yeah.
And I got three herniated discs at 19 and then a hernia at 20. So my body broke. And
Hmm.
this past summer, it worked out perfectly. I was writing a mini tail for an exercise and I started getting so antsy just to hit, like, I need to do something else where I can get my novels in front of people who are willing to actually read them, and I can
Hmm.
actually start growing a career. I don't want to self publish. It's just not for me. I want to be traditionally published. I want to work with a team. I want to work with editors and marketing people. I want to understand the business in that sense,
Hmm.
the broader business. How can I get out there and do it? And as the summer started to approach, I started to rethink some things with discus. My body was falling apart. I didn't really like. You have to be pretty heavy to throw, and I don't really like being heavy. I wanted to slim down. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be happy. I realized that it was really holding me back. I couldn't devote all of my time to learning and researching and attacking my career.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to let go of it. Like I told all these people that I wanted to be a professional discus thrower, that I wanted to be a pro athlete, maybe an Olympian. It's like, well, it doesn't matter. So I let it go. And then I said, wait a second. Oh my gosh. I have this whole thing that I'm doing that isn't a book. It's not a book. I don't have to
Hmm.
self-publish volumes of it. I can put it online the way that people used to read like Reddit serials or people go on Wattpad, but I didn't want to do that either. I wanted it to be brand and then start selling art and things like that. So I just went fully into it. And yeah, it was 100% intentional. The idea of kind of connecting it to being able to go to conventions, for instance, like I've been to Gen Con and things, and starting to try and
Hmm.
talk to agents and editors about that and the potential of what I can maybe bring to the table business wise, and also learn marketing myself and really get out there and just try to figure out, okay, what's a really fun way to address these things with a medium that is pretty marketable in the fact that you can jump in almost any week and fully understand it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was 100% intentional. It came down to a lot of factors, but the approach to a many tail on a macro sense, outside of just the artistic sense, is very very intentional.
And I mean, from as far as I can tell, very well executed. Because like on the website, and I'll link it in the description for anyone that wants to go see it. There's a section where you can read a many tale. You can see all the volumes that are up so far. And then there's a section that talks about you, talks about the story. Another that's about media, but everything is like very like self-contained. I don't know if you designed the website, but something that I always like to notice about web design is the more you can keep someone on your website, the better.
Hmm.
So everything that you have there is pretty much self-contained. Everything you have embedded, any like contact information, all that stuff is there. And I found it really smart, especially because like as I was getting ready to interview you, I was like, I want to read up a little bit on your background, maybe see some
Hmm.
previous interviews. Everything was there, and I think that's your intention. And like you said, you go to conventions and stuff like that. Everything ties in perfectly, and it reminded me of like as a comedian, what we can do is maybe we can take like clips of our stand up and post it on TikTok or post it on
Yes.
like you don't post a whole 10, 15 minute set, right? Because you want
Hmm.
people to come to your show. And it's really interesting that as an author, I never really thought about it, but it's like if you don't have a novel published, what can you do? You can't publish, an excerpt of your novel because people won't get it. Um, and I think your solution for that was like super creative because it gives people an in to who you are and what your voice is, and it leaves them wanting more. And like as far as I have it understood, you don't have anything published yet, but like when you do have something published, all the people that followed a many tale, I assure you 100% that they're going to buy that first book, and that's really smart.
I'm really thank you. Those were very nice words. Yeah, I the I was hoping that it was going to work, and I just kind of put it all out there because that was the exact thought is that, well, I've been doing this as an exercise anyway, and now I really like it. It means a lot to me. It might not be my best prose in terms of the quality of the words, but some of the stories are really good, and the story overall is really good. So if someone jumps in and I can go to conventions and I can sell a free product that you don't have to pay for at all, but have it
Mhm,
very professionally presentable, maybe I can actually show, hey, like to go to the larger publishers, hey guys, I I've got something. I think I'd really like to work with you. Like I have something that
mhm.
maybe you want to take a look at. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to nothing. And then hopefully that starts to build a fan base with exactly what you said. Hopefully we create a community around something that's a little bit strange, a little strange.
That's like something that I love about doing the show is I always learn at least one thing from every guest that's on here. And as I was seeing that, like I said, I used to do quite a bit of stand up before the pandemic. Then during the pandemic, I really got into, like you said, I'm just like you. I love learning, and I always wanted to learn how to like do filmmaking and screenwriting. So I went back to school for that, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. And I see a many tale, I'm just like, oh well, maybe it'd be a good idea to, obviously no one's going to hire a director that hasn't directed anything yet, so
Mhm.
maybe do a like short series on YouTube or here or there, something to get my voice out there, have a portfolio. And that's something I picked up from you, and I'm going to use it for myself. And anyone that's listening to this, like, you can do that. You don't have to wait to be published, or
Yeah.
you don't have to wait till you get signed to an agency or this or that. You can just go out and do your stuff, especially now that anyone can make a website, anyone
Yeah.
can post something on YouTube. And it takes effort to make it look as professional as you've done, and I'm sure you've invested some money into that as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But
Definitely.
it's definitely worth it. um, I have a couple questions. I wrote them down so I don't forget, but the first one relating to that, how did you get the funding for all that stuff? How did you get all that up and running? Because it does not only takes time, but it takes money. I wonder what's the story there.
Yeah. So I honestly asked my mom for money. I'm not gonna hide it. I use a lot of my cash, a lot of money that I had lying around for. I would get hand pressed prints because I really like to sculpt and paint stuff. I don't know if I have any
Hmm.
right here. I don't. But like linoleum block, and I cut it out, and then I got really cheap black paper. So I bought a lot of the supplies myself, and I for the logo and stuff because I wanted a really good looking logo. Like I said,
Hmm.
my mom's a choreographer. She also runs an education department,
Hmm.
and got a friend to got her friend to do it. So the goal now is that initially the cost wasn't super high, just because mostly it was the website, and we
Hmm.
got the logo for a very good price, that sort of thing. I'm starting to invest a lot of my own money. I'm taking out a lot of savings and things to make business moves in terms of we're getting tables at a lot of conventions, upcoming conventions around sort of the Northeast, and
Hmm.
building a big display, that sort of thing. And that takes a lot more money than what I've done so far. Because basically, like I said, it's mostly the website cost, and the rest of it is
Hmm.
just really trying to be creative with how can I make this. Like for instance, I didn't pay a designer to do the website because it would have cost a crap ton of money. I
Hmm.
just kind of played around on Wix until I liked it.
Hmm.
the,
Hmm.
the first version did not look good. I'll tell you that. The initial like version in
Yeah.
August, it was really ugly.
I think I've gone through like 10 iterations of mine until I got somewhere
Yeah,
like, this is nice.
yeah. Eventually, it gets there. It just sort of takes some toying. So
Hmm.
yeah, the money I asked my mom, especially because I wasn't training anymore. And I said, hey, like the money that was going to training, it's basically like paying for school.
Hmm.
It's like, would you want to help me with this? And she was like, that
Hmm.
sounds a lot more fun than going to training.
Well, it sounds like you have a really supportive family, at least a really supportive mom.
Extremely.
That's really cool. I've told this story a couple times on the podcast, but when I told my parents I was wanted to be a comedian or I want to be a filmmaker, they're like, "You sure about that? I don't know."
Yeah.
Um, up until this point, it's all been like self finance and
Hmm.
working through it. Um, but I think it's so cool. I mean, eventually they came around to it, and they don't think it's such a crazy idea anymore. But to have your mom on board since day one, that's an incredible blessing.
Yeah, it is. I really can't stress enough how much that I love and appreciate her. The the level at which, especially because, like I said, we used to travel all the time. So me and my brother were just with her always. We were traveling
Hmm.
and seeing some of the best performers in the world. We have cousins that have won serious awards like Grammys for music and stuff. And
Cool.
um, being in that environment, and then like I live in small town Pennsylvania, and then coming home, everyone around me was like, what is this guy doing? Because I was high school, I was like class president and a big athlete. I was like, I'm not going to school. I'm going to be a writer. And everyone, what? But
Yeah.
to her, it was never crazy because she raised me and she raised my brother, who's also doing some pretty cool stuff. And I just like sat her down and I said, hey, this is the route that I want to go.
Hmm.
I'm willing to completely go off on my own. I just want to let you know this is what I'm doing. And she blessed, very blessed.
That's amazing, man. I'm happy to hear that because it's not. I mean, it's not about money. It's more like for your parents to say like, absolutely, go do it, or I think you're a great writer, or this and that. Like, it gives you that confidence to tell your
Hmm.
friends like, hey, you should read this first novel I wrote, even if it might not be the best one, but like it's there's like an enormous amount of value in just believing in yourself, and it's really hard to start that without having someone first to believe in you. And
It
it sounds
really
super
is.
cheesy, but like
No,
it's
it's
super
true.
necessary.
If I didn't have my mother in my life, I wouldn't even be even like a tenth of this. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's put in the perfect circumstances, honestly.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I mean now we can all have a taste of a many tale and hopefully sometime soon, a taste of one of your novels. One of the things that I have written down here that I don't want to forget is how many do you have like ready to go? Like, do you have one that's if a publisher comes to you today and says, hey, we'd love to have you on. What do you got?
Yeah, I've actually got a couple or a
Nice.
few. So I try to do like 2 to 3 a year is what I've been doing the last couple of years. A many
2 to 3
tale.
novels a year is what you said?
I try to write really fast. Yeah,
Oof,
I
nice.
didn't at first, but I don't really know how it happened. I just started kind of increasing the words every day, and
Hmm.
it got to the point where I started to get really comfortable, and it wasn't as sloppy, if that also makes sense. It didn't
Yeah.
take months for me to edit stuff down. So I have a YA book, a young adult book that's up
Hmm.
perfectly ready to query. I have an adult book that's sort of being finished up at the moment, and then I have a kids book and then another YA/adult book, depending on the market.
That's cool because we're talking about our parents. Something that my dad has always told me when it comes to like doing stand up or making movies or something is just like, you got to keep your head down, just work the whole time. People might not notice you, but you want the first time someone to notice you and them to ask you like, okay, so what do you got? You want to have something. You don't want to be empty handed. Like, well, I promise you, I could probably write a really great novel.
Hmm.
You want to say like, oh, thank you so much for showing up to my booth. Here's what I have to offer you, and
Totally.
it's cool that I think it's insane that you write 2 to 3 novels a year. That's amazing. People
It's
don't even read 2 to 3 novels a year.
it yes, it's a lot of work, honestly. But I have to attribute that to like I grew up with a mother who worked
Hmm.
ferociously, and I also was an athlete. And part of the reason that I wanted to do athletics was to become a more disciplined artist because in my mom's circle, I saw so many people just fall away because they just weren't willing to do the work.
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm going to have a real business attitude towards this. Now I'm going to be very artistic in the approach and the execution, but when it comes to getting my work done, I'm going to really treat it like training. And it took a few years, but I'm at the point where I love it. I really like writing like crazy.
Yeah, I feel like I had a similar conversation with my dad. 'Cause at first he didn't really understand, like, "Hey, you can do stand-up for a living, or you can do this for a living." I was like, the same way you'd put 40 hours a week into, an office gig, you can put 40 hours a week into writing and performing.
Exactly.
And I feel like
Exactly.
that's where he kinda, like, started turning around. Before the pandemic, I mean, I quit my job that I had, and just did stand-up for, like, a year and a half, and it was amazing. Like, I wrote so much.
Good for
I
you.
im
That's amazing.
thank you. I improved so much as a performer, and it wasn't until then that then after that I would call my parents and be like, "Hey, did you go to an open mic today?" Or, "Hey, did you work on that joke you were talking about earlier?" And that's when they started turning around because my parents, not artistic people, but their language that they can understand is hard work, and I feel like that's
Mhm.
what anyone can understand. And but like you said, being an artist, I mean, there's some romanticized version of being like, yeah, man, I just roam around the world and don't do anything, and I just write whatever comes to my mind. But
Yeah.
then I mean, you have to think of it as a business at some point, and I feel like it's cool in both ways to look at it. And I feel like sometimes I like being that other guy, that hippie. Other times you have to just do the hard work and do the nitty gritty and make your own website, or
Mhm.
pay an artist to make your logo. All these different things.
Yeah. The balancing act is really, to me, it's really fun, and I'm sure that you've also experienced that. Like because you get to learn the whole time, every step that you take, you get to learn something new, and you get to apply that, and then you
Mhm,
start to become more well rounded because that. If you look at those really great writers and great artists from whether it's the 20th century or the 19th century, the 18th century, even Renaissance,
mhm,
they were struggling so hard to make it until they did. It's the same as nowadays. They were working all the time. They were writing for newspapers. You had to submit a story every day or every week to make it by. And novels, when they started to become serialized, that that transition and the way that people used to paint for commission, I feel like people have a little bit of a romanticized idea sometimes if you're unfamiliar with how it works, where you
mhm.
can think back and go, yeah, I want to sit in a villa and watch the sunset, and it'll take me 15 minutes to do this painting. But really,
Yeah.
you sit and for 3 weeks you paint a sunset every single day, and then finally you get
Yeah.
one that you like. And finding the joy in that and the love in that, I feel like the second
Mhm.
that happens, like that year for you is probably amazing. It just things start to really click.
Yeah. And then you start to like the first time I actually wrote a stand-up set, like, I wrote what I thought were gonna be 10 minutes, and then I go up on stage and it's a minute and a half. And like you think uh, seeing it from the outside before starting to write, a novel or a short story or a stand up set, you're like, oh, I could do that. And then like you sit down and you're like, oh, it takes, 200 hours to come up with something like this.
Yeah,
And then, people read it in 10 minutes or people enjoy it in 5, but it's like super rewarding to get to that point because like you mulled over what words to use, or you thought about like, what kind of performance am I going to give today, or it's so much work that goes into it, but it's really rewarding when it comes to fruition. And
it
that's
really
something
is.
that's like always key with all these interviews. Everyone kind of agrees that like it's super hard work, but it's lovely to see your hard work come to the, in your case, come to the page. Like, have people read it and tell you, I enjoyed your story.
Mhm.
I heard some of your stories about going to different conventions and people coming up to you. I think you told us a story on the Nerdarchy show where I think people came up to you like one day, hey, what's that mouse about? And the next day they're like, oh, I read your stories. And
Crazy.
that's insane. That's super cool.
Yeah,
And
that
sorry, I was just gonna say it's really
okay.
cool to hear that people relate to what you're writing.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure that you've experienced something similar where you probably always wanted to do it, or you did a little bit of it and you were working on it. And for me, the last 5 years, 4.5, 5 years, was just I was training all the time for discus, and I was getting
Mm-hmm.
my high from competing. And then I got
Mm-hmm.
injured a couple times, and I couldn't compete for like 2 years. I could barely
Mm-hmm.
walk up the steps because of my hernia.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I felt bottled up, just caged. I was writing in my room like this right here. I was writing in my room
Yeah.
like a madman. with papers all over the place, and my friends would be like, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" I'd be like, "Writing." I'm in the pit. I'm in the darkness.
Yeah.
I'd never shown anybody my work outside of pitching short stories to magazines sometimes.
Mhm.
So when a many tale happened, I started to go, "Oh my god, I'm feeling it." And that story from Neraki is 100% true. I built a mascot out of paper mache and put him in my backpack. I was
Mhm.
walking around. That was incredible. I'd never experienced anything like that. And then I got hooked and started taking this project. I was already taking it seriously, but I started taking it very seriously after that because I'm
That's sorry, I was gonna say that's awesome because that also gives you like the fuel to be like, okay, well, people like at least my
yeah.
voice, my worlds. I'm gonna keep writing these novels. Like I'm onto
Mhm.
something.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of a am I crazy? Like that delusion that you were talking about.
Yeah.
You start to go, okay, I'm really proud of this. I think it's going to be great. And then someone sees it. And if they actually go, hey, this is really good. Like, this is amazing.
Mhm.
I'm sure that's happened on stage for you before where you write something, you're like, oh, this is like, this joke's stellar. And then it does well. Or you write something great. And same thing for me.
And it
Sometimes
does.
it just, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it
that's
could
where it
go both
proves it.
ways. You can write something that you're like, this is amazing, genius. I'm never going to come up with anything better than this. And then you go up on stage, like, oh, people don't like it. Okay, time to go on to the next thing or work on it a little bit more.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I wanted this like off topic from writing and all that stuff. You talk about discus and talk about your hernia. I just had a hernia repaired last year and I was gonna tell you, what you said you had herniated discs, which I know that's on your spinal cord, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the hernia, what type of hernia was that? I just wanna, because mine was an inguinal hernia, and I had like this little bulge in my stomach, and it wasn't painful for me, but it was kind of bothersome. And I'm 27,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, bro, like, who gets hernias in their 20s? Like, this is stuff that like my 40-year-old dad deals with. And I told people I had hernias. They're like, oh yeah, my grandpa has a hernia. Oh yeah, my uncle has a hernia. I was like, fuck, dude, I'm fucking in my
Same
20s.
here.
How do I have a hernia?
Yeah. Oh my God. We should start a club. Like there should be a special club for people. Like get them young, you know?
There should be a support club for hernia in your 20s, so you don't feel like
Yeah.
your body's wasting away.
Like I've aged 30 years in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That was that was weird. So essentially, what happened was it was a week from my first meet of the year, and I had been throwing farther than I'd ever thrown before. Like I would possibility to qualify for some really huge competitions in that first meet, which typically it
Hmm.
takes 10. I was so ready. I was ready to attack. I was like, oh, I put up the biggest lifting numbers I'd ever had in my life. I
Uh-huh.
ran the fastest I've ever run in my life. I was throwing the farthest. The very night that I had my biggest lifting day, I put up wild numbers. I texted my coach, hey, like I don't know what just happened to me, but I feel amazing.
Hmm.
Went to sleep. I woke up to pee. And when I went in the bathroom, this incredible pain just radiated through my body. And I looked down and had a huge bulge. So I still competed that weekend like an idiot. I didn't move at all week until that competition
Hmm.
because it's just I don't know masculine pride I guess. But
Yeah.
it took me a few weeks. I went and got a lot of PT, a lot of therapy, and I had to get a lot of tests done because they thought that there were a lot of things that could have been wrong. It ended up
Hmm.
being just a sport hernia with a lymph node on top of it. So it
Hmm.
looked like it
Okay.
was a true hernia, but I guess what happened was that there was a little bit of a tear in my pelvic muscle along with it,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
the organ was bulging through that tear. It was weirdly complicated, but I didn't have to get surgery, thank God.
That's amazing, dude. Because like mine is what they call an inguinal hernia. Like again, like
Yeah,
there
it's
was a
horrible.
tear in the muscle and it's popping out. And the doctor is like poking at it. He's like, "Does this not hurt you?" I was like, "No, I don't feel anything." He's like, "Well, you're lucky then, because usually it hurts people a lot."
Yeah.
But they did have to do a surgery. But yeah, that's crazy. You're the first person I meet that also had a hernia in their 20s. The only thing is, I don't do discus and I don't lift up a shit ton of weights. I don't know what the fuck happened to me, but it's cool. It's cool to know that it happened to someone else.
Oh, me too. I feel like better about myself now because it just it's so odd how the human body's so weird. Like
It
you
is very weird.
just happened, and then the they weren't sure what happened to me again because I said it was in a really weird spot, and I thought that it was an inguinal hernia because the pain was absurd. I mean, I couldn't. We had just gotten a puppy, and she slept with me.
Hmm.
I had to play with her for. She's a collie, so like
Hmm.
6 hours a day throwing frisbee,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the I was miserable because I was just like limping around, trying not to aggravate it. But when I went to my doctors, they were like, "You, we don't think that you need a surgery." And then I went to the ART doctor, like active recovery, and
Hmm.
I did so much PT. I didn't lift a weight for a year, like anything heavy.
Hmm. Well,
Now
that's
it's all
good, man.
good.
I'm glad you're all recovered. I'm glad we're both good.
Yeah, I'm glad you're good
Um,
too. That is those are rough. Those can be really troublesome.
they're rough, and I mean, luckily the surgery, the recovery took no more than a week and a half. So back on my
Oh, thank
feet
God.
pretty soon.
Good for you. That's
Um, I mean, it's been a great conversation so far, man. We're nearing the end here. I always like to end on a similar question for all my guests.
mhm.
I always ask my guests that are on if you could give yourself any type of advice when you first started this journey. I mean, you can choose when you first started a many tale or when you first started writing your novels or when you first decided you wanted to be a writer. What kind of advice would you give yourself now? I mean, we talked about, hindsight 2020. I'm sure you've learned stuff along the way that it'd be very useful for you to know, 4 or 5 years ago.
I would say write more. I wrote a lot, but I would say write more. Just write as much as possible. Build up a work capacity the same way that if you're training in any way, shape, or form, whether it's running, whether it's lifting, I don't care what it is. I would just say work more.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like I said, a lot of people romanticize what it is to be an artist and ideas will come, but sometimes you just got to jot down, even if they're bad ideas, jot them
Mhm.
down and then the best ones will come after. So
Absolutely.
I like that. I'm actually going to take that to heart because I'm writing a short story, a short film right now, and sometimes I don't have any idea what to write. And, parts of my script are just like, blah, blah, blah. He says something like this here, then something like this happens. And then I'll come back to it the next day and be like, oh, well, duh, this is what he said. Or, this is
Exactly.
what happens. But you just have to get it out there or else you're going to forget it. Um, so I like that advice, man. Thank you so much for being on today. It was a pleasure having you on, learning about your life story. I hope you had some fun.
Thank you so much for having me. This was tremendous. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm sure I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot. We're gonna plug your website. We're gonna plug your website. It has basically everything you want to plug on there. So if people want to poke
Mhm.
around, is there anything else you want to mention before we head out here?
Just anybody out here, there's the people that are working on stuff, people that have ideas. I'm sure that's what a lot of people that watch this are, or who they are. Just go for it. You'll figure it out. Even if you're stumbling, even if you look up the really high steps, and I know it's so cheesy to say, if you look up the huge steps and you're like, oh, I don't know how to get there. I mean, there's only one way to get there. There's
Hmm.
no plane that's going to take you. Just figure it out because once you take that little step and those first few steps, the fear starts to go away, and then you get a little competitive or you get excited with yourself. Go for it. Go for it.